I read them.
Oh yeah, we're good. We'll hit them.
I wish I would have, but I was reading on this stuff and got interested in it.
It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it does appear that right now on YouTube we are going. Um, Not 100% sure if you can hear us there. I'm going to go live on Facebook now. I won't be able to keep up with the comments, so we'll have to do them at the end if that's what you want to do. But I think we are live now. Um, I'm going to check in a second and make sure that that's the case. But I'm Brent. I am going to be uh, accompanied by Pastor Tammy D. Santiago. Now, on your Facebook, it's Pastor Tammy Wallace, I think, or what's the other name? Is that your maiden name?
Yeah, my name's actually Tamara, but I go by Tammy,
So
and
it's
it's
not
Wallace. That's
Tamsin,
my no, it's not Tams. No, but
Tamara.
I've learned to adjust to. And I've been called worse than that. Let's just put it that way.
Now, how long have you been a pastor? How when the I no, I know a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna say what I think I know, and then you clear up my confusion. But at some point, you were a part of a prayer team, and they asked you to take over the prayer team, and that's how this all started. Is that right? Is that a correct?
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, I started off as a prayer. Actually, I started off as the janitor. Let's be
Okay.
honest. I started off as a janitor. I went from that to joining a prayer team, and the person stepped down, and they said that they said that Tammy lady should be the one to take over. So I took it over, and the ministry really grew. And then I was asked to be a deacon, and then we went from deacon to elders, and then we went from elders to pastors. And so I've been pastoring probably about 26 years now,
Nice. That's
so quite
wonderful.
a while.
I
Yeah.
feel so. I got involved. All right. So obviously, I got saved at a young age, but following Christ, reading my Bible, Bible studies, being a part of fellowship, I didn't do any of that for many years. I partied and I just lived a secular life. I went to public school. I was raised in a single parent household, all of the good stuff. But over the last 5 to 10 years, I really started to get plugged in. And what I remember is some of the friends I had, one of them said to me that he was called to preach the gospel. And I was like, from who? And he told me a story about his mom having a vision. And I thought that was quite uh, awesome, just the whole entire conversation. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was visiting your church on Friday nights. I wasn't a member at your church or anything like that. I just would visit on Friday nights, and you started to prophesy, which I wasn't really familiar with a lot of that stuff either. I had been to church, very few times in my whole life, and most of them were Baptist type of churches, and your church is non-denomination, but there's a Pentecostal thing going on there. And but you got to prophesy, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but you laid hands on
No.
me and told me I was called to preach the gospel, and it was the timing of it was amazing. And that's how I just got fired up after that, and my life started to change dramatically, a lot on my own decision and my own accord. I started to be more disciplined in the way I spoke, things like that. But also the Lord has changed a lot. So
Oh
that's how I
gosh,
got
you're a
involved.
different person. You're a different person. I wish people could even just see the growth and the hunger that you have for the Lord and the desire to please Him. You are full speed. I mean, you
Yeah,
are
yeah,
full
true. And
speed ahead.
they're my family members, and I have friends for a long time. Like Josh, we do another show on another thing.
Hmm.
He's been my friend for such a long time, and our friends that we've known our whole life, they know that something different has happened. So it's very cool. I think it's very powerful. I've seen the Lord do a lot, and I got to say, this election to me, I think that there was a move of God. I almost feel like it's undeniable. I know people think it's crazy. I'm grateful for every American that showed up to vote. My daughter went out and voted. I'm so grateful. But there was a move of God last night. I really believe that.
Yeah, amen. I think it's foolish not to believe that.
So much prayer. So many churches were praying. Our church prayed on Monday night. So many people were really praying.
And Tuesday night.
And I mean, Trump himself had went from church to church to church, getting, people were prophesying and praying over him. I mean, he listened to that guy. I don't know if you know that guy. Then he wrote a book about gosh, I can't even think of it right now. Tammy, sorry to get ready for that part. But he wrote a
That's
book
okay.
and he prophesied over Trump and he had all this stuff. And it really feels like Christian prayer and a move of the Lord really helped us get over. Now, I'm going to point out something, and this is a little sidebar from what we're actually going to talk about before we get off of this. And this makes my thing run longer. I know I told you 20 minutes or something. I always end up running longer because I get sidetracked. But did you see the numbers from when Biden won in 2020 and the numbers now on the back end of this, the voting numbers?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it's been this election has been very consuming, and to see the difference in the numbers, the emotional connection that the whole United States, not just Christians, but people have. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, and I'm a lot older than you, and it's been crazy. And the numbers, the numbers are unbelievable. When Biden won, they said that Trump, he did not win the popular vote.
Yeah.
And this time he won every vote. I mean, really, the popular vote and the electoral.
And it's wild because I think it was 160 million Americans voted in 2020, and Biden had 81 million popular vote, and then Biden had just enough in all of the swing states to win. But in this one, we're looking at more 150 million, and they're calling it one of the biggest turnouts ever. And the numbers, it's like there's 10 to 15 million votes. And I don't wear a tinfoil hat, Tammy. I'm not trying to say that the election was stolen, but it looks like
Oh gosh.
maybe I texted Josh last night pretty late, about 11:15, right after they called North Carolina and they were still dealing with Georgia. And I said, Josh, are there a bunch of COVID votes coming in that we don't know about? Like, is that going to happen again? Like at 2 in the morning, they find 100,000 votes in a van and they're all for her. And Josh said, no, Brent, go to bed. Trump is going to win. And so that was cool. Now, that is
That was
not
really
why
cool.
I'm going to steal your line from all of your lives. That's not why I want to hear. That's not what we're here to talk. Okay, we're going to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. No,
That's right.
so I want to talk to you about something I found completely crazy, and I don't know how much you know about this. I know I reached out to you today and asked you to do this with me. There's states that emphatically went for Donald Trump. That means people went into these machines and they chose Donald Trump and are looking at the House and the Senate, they may have voted a red ticket all the way down. And then in Arizona, for example, this state went for Trump. It's going for Trump. They're still counting there, but it went for Trump. He got the electoral vote. Senate, the House, a lot of the issues are red issues that the Americans who live in Arizona voted for. However, they voted to keep the abortion to 24 weeks to viability. So there's something weird that's going on with the voters because Trump is labeled as a pro-life candidate. They are accusing this man that now that he's won, women are going to bleed to death who are having miscarriages because in states that have the ban, they won't perform the abortion, so the women are going to die with the baby. They're saying that Trump is going to be like a candidate that makes all women. I think that their belief is that we're all just going to force women to have babies. I don't know what the paranoia is exactly. But then you look and you see Americans voted for him, and then they voted for the late term abortion. So I wanted to talk to you tonight about abortion. I wanted to talk to you about Christian conservatives. I wanted to talk to you about Trump. Is he a pro life candidate or is he a pro choice candidate? And I want to start by asking you, are you pro life or are you pro choice? Where do you think your politics stand?
Well, I think, well, I know where I stand. I don't even think I'm pro-life. I believe that life was what the word says, that has been conceived in the womb, and by God, breath is breathed on by God. It is, God. He's the one who had this life, and so I believe that we don't have the right to take a life. You know, the Old Testament talks about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And in all the laws, it says if you kill something, you have to, you know, you have to pay back that for life for life. You know, if you kill someone's animal, you have to repay that. So I am definitely life all the way.
Pro-life. And so this is an issue in America because number one, obviously, I don't you remember because you say you're a lot older than me. I don't think 20 years is that much older than me. You know, you're a couple decades older than me. You're a different generation.
Wait,
Are
I
you
think 20 years sounded way better than decades, okay?
are you a boomer? Is that your generation? Do you
You
know?
know what? I'm very surprised. I found out several years ago I am. I was the last year 62. They consider 62 as
So
the
I
last year of the
and
boomers.
I'm Generation X. No, yeah,
Hmm.
Generation X, and but I'm right 1 year above millennial. So the next year after I was born, 1980, is millennials. So I have millennial tendencies. Let me tell you. But
Yeah.
I say this. Do you remember in this nation when women were leaving babies that they didn't want at doorsteps or leaving? Do you remember those? We used to have reports. I know in the 80s that in the 70s women were leaving kids places because they didn't want the babies. Do you remember that time in this
Yeah.
nation?
Absolutely. There was times that people would leave them and they would leave them in bad places. I mean, in garbage bags and buy garbage, you know, in the back of stores and stuff like that. I love that today, though, there's a lot of laws that if you will take your baby to a police station, a hospital, or even a fire station, and you don't even have to say anything. You can just hand them babies over and say, I can't, and they will, you know, there's no charges against you. You have saved that baby's life and you have promised it, you know, a hope.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think we've come light years in this nation when it comes to things like uh, letting kids be fostered, letting children be,
Yeah.
taken care of. And this was always funny to me on this issue. The same side of the issue of abortion, and we're talking, we've went from, okay, you found out you're pregnant, or you've been assaulted and you found out you're pregnant, and we're going to abort the baby, to letting you make that decision at like 24 weeks. Like, it's pretty late in the game in some of these areas to let people have abortions. We've went kind of crazy, and some of the people on the same side of that are pro gay marriage. They want homosexual men and women to be married together, and it's interesting to me because you think if you have that view, the reality is, unfortunately for homosexuals, they cannot produce. So if a man marries a man, there's no baby to be born. You would think pro-abortion people, which I think there's pro. I've come to the conclusion there's pro-life, there's pro-choice, and then there's pro-abortion. Okay, the
Uh-huh.
pro-abortion people, you would think they would have a heart to say these gay couples could raise kids if you would let the babies be born and you could let them adopt, but they're against that too for some reason. It's bizarre.
You know, we all have a view of what is our right and what is our wrong. And the problem with that is it's all about what we think. And it's not centered around the word of God. We make our opinions by what we see, not what we know that the word says. And it's funny too, because a lot of people who say they're Christians, they really do not understand what the word says. I was raised in a Catholic church, and one of the things in the Catholic Church is you do not have abortions. That's a sin in the Catholic Church. Yet I have a lot of family who are Democrats and who vote, and I'm thinking that is the reason one of the major reasons why I did not vote Democratic is because I cannot believe that. Yet we have people who, you know, one of Trump's big things is life. He's pro-life, and here we have people who vote for him but do not believe that part of him,
Yeah,
a part of his message
yeah. And
or
they
his
call him,
conviction.
this is what's interesting to me because he was in a debate and he said they were asking him because they tried to turn Christians against him. This campaign, and in all the campaigns, I'm going to be honest in a second, but in this campaign, they tried to turn Christians against Donald Trump. That was a kind of goal by using abortion because he's kind of a pro-choice candidate. He's okay with the Plan B, with the after the morning pill. He's okay with early abortions earlier. He's really not here to try to, like you and I are talking. If you were on the Supreme Court, if you were in the Senate, if you were in the House, if you were the president, you would lean towards pro-life, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
getting
yeah.
it out of entirely. But Trump is saying it's up to the states. So blue states have a ball if you want to. If you want to have abortions, have abortions. And he said it. He's any area that you have a crack with abortion, then you've entered pro-choice. If there's any, he said there are exceptions with the life of the mother, exceptions for assault, exceptions for, there's a lot of exceptions. Trump himself, it was okay with. However, his big deal was take it out of the hands of the federal government. That's something I haven't been able to stand my entire life, is that the federal government is ruling that every state has to deal with abortion rights in late term. The late term stuff to me is gross. I can't any of that. The closer to birth that you get, the grosser this whole plan gets. But Trump is really a bit of a pro-choice candidate.
Well, I think it's interesting because I've been reading your posts and stuff, and I've seen how this whole situation has really brought concern to your spirit, which I believe
Yeah,
is, the Holy Spirit. And I think that's why you're where you're at. And I think that you're absolutely right. I do think what I do like is that I believe less government. And,
yeah,
and so the fact that he helped turn Roe versus Wade, but he gave it back to the states. He did, you're right. He did not say that you cannot have abortions. And his wife the other day, I watched her. She was in our new first lady, who's beautiful,
yeah.
and she was interviewed, and they says, "How does he feel about you being pro-choice?" And she was calmly, "He knows where I stand." And it's interesting too because you had the Democrats who said, Julia Roberts, who's a movie star, says, vote. You don't have to tell your husband. And the sneakiness of that and the deception of that is crazy to me. And that's I think a lot of abortions are done that way. The other person, I think that a lot of the men don't know that they've even made a baby. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? I
sure.
think women sometimes go and they sneak and they do because they don't want to deal with it. They think they've made a mistake, and that's the only way that they see out of it. And I also want to look at the fact that, with these states who did vote for abortion rights to, which it's again, I don't think you should get an abortion at all. But I understand though why people do that because there's some things that I voted Trump. There's some things that he does stand for that I don't agree with. And so, but it doesn't, but the moral issues for me were important, and that's why I voted for him. But I understand why sometimes, they like his policies that, he brought more money into our pockets.
Yeah,
He brought more jobs. He made life was better with him as president. And, unfortunately, if you think about bringing a child into the world, it adds stress to all them areas that he's bringing help to.
sure. And this
And
is the
so,
that's the big thing about Trump. And this is so, because it became an issue in my actual family over the last 2 years. It's been really, abortion has been really a big deal to me, and I'm a male. And when I get into these discussions, people act as if I have no right to speak at all. But I am a male who paid child support for a child for, uh, you know, 15 years. So I think that I've paid my dues, so to speak, on children, and then I have daughters, and these decisions have come up in my own family. So, to me, I think I do have a right to say something about it, even though me myself, I'll never have a baby inside of me, and I'll never have to make that decision. I still think I have a right, and so I started to dive into this stuff, Tammy, and look at it. And the first thing I want to say is, You brought up the economy, the other policies that Trump protects, the freedoms of low regulation, low taxes. These things free up all of us to be able to work. His tough stance on imports and other nations that really don't like us, that don't have the same values as us, but they make plenty of money and their GDP
Off
off
of
of us.
us.
Yeah. And so those are the major, if you go look this up, the major issues in this election was the economy. It was
Oh, yeah.
public safety. It was, and so to bring up abortion and run it like they did was, I think, a weakness on her campaign. People keep saying, "Oh, America's not ready for a woman president," and I keep saying that was just a bad campaign. I mean, that whole entire situation has nothing to do with her being a woman. But
No.
abortion was really low on the totem pole. Having that said, if your wife and you get pregnant together, if you're married and your wife gets pregnant and she doesn't really want to do this, and there's a lot of reasons why. She maybe works a full-time job and you work a full-time job and you can barely pay the bills. Maybe she just doesn't want to take care of a kid. Maybe she's worried about her physical appearance. Whatever reason that the wife this is a consensual husband and wife relationship, she gets pregnant and she decides that she wants to have an abortion. I don't think that it's ethical or correct that the husband has no idea. Okay, don't let him have a say on it, but at least write the man an email and let him know that a child that if he didn't want, he would have to pay child support for. Like, is this conclusion I'm drawing to when a woman gets pregnant, she doesn't want to have a baby because it's going to affect her financially or whatever, she's able to kill this child, but when a man doesn't want to have a baby, he has to pay child support even after Obama up until they get out of college.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just so one-sided. You're absolutely right. And why a woman well, when you're married, you just have responsibilities and obligations to be honest and open. And if you go and abort your child without your spouse knowing, I mean, that marriage is really almost over, because that is such a dishonest trust issue. But I think you're right. Why do you have to pay that support if I was reading the other day where a man went to jail because he did not pay his child support. He went to jail and he was in jail for 5 years, got out, and they decided that so they were going to he was going back in, and he says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and they're taking him back to court to tell him how much he was going to pay now because he's out of jail. And for some reason, he decided he needed what is it called? A parental DNA test.
Sure.
Guess what? Guess what? That child was not even his. And he spent 5 years in jail for not paying for something that wasn't even his child. And then he gets out, and can you imagine what he went through? I mean, it's just, our laws, the way we do things are crazy. And especially when it comes to these children who are truly gifts from God.
They
You
really
know,
are.
they know God has a plan that they've been conceived. There's a
From
plan.
whatever the scenario was, the minute they were conceived, there was a plan. The Lord is
There is
not,
a
yeah, and this is what wilds me out. Like you're talking about with going to jail. There are more scenarios in this country, and they can't pay rent, they can't pay a car note, they can't pay car insurance because they have this huge burden of child support and they're trying to pay it. Some of these men commit crime to pay child support. Some of them do go to jail time, Tammy. And what good are you in jail? How do you care for a
none.
kid from jail? There's bizarre because there's more scenarios of these dramatic scenarios where what if the woman has no provisions, she can't feed the baby, she can't give these scenarios that some of these liberals argue aren't real in this country.
No,
If you
they're
register,
not real.
you get help. If you make no money and you're pregnant, they pay the $18,000 bill at the hospital, and they give you WIC, and they give you Medicaid, and they give you financial aid.
Food stamp.
They'll give you a place to live. It may not be ideal, but there's no real scenario in this country where you're going to have a kid with no provision whatsoever. That is not a realistic thing. But there are lots of scenarios where men are getting locked up who are trying to juggle the child support. Good men, in some cases, men that are deadbeat dads. But in some cases, men that are trying to do the best they can with child support.
Well, and I do think that, and I'm not a man hater, and I'm not a woman hater. I really try to look at everything, neutrally. But we have a great man, and he has two children. His wife, they were married, and his wife had an affair, and they got divorced, and she moved support, and she does not let him see him, and he's by law.
That's
He's supposed to be able to see his children. He has paying his support. He's supposed to be able to see, but every time it's time, they get sick or she can't make it, and oh, she don't have the gas money to drive up halfway because they live in Florida now. She can't do it, and here he is paying, and the resentment and the anger and the hurt. And he says when he does get his kids, it's like they look at him like, you don't care about us anyway. And he says it's an emotional wear on men as well. And you're right. They only think about the woman in this, but that's what this whole abortion thing is about. It's such what is right for me, not for the life in me, not for the gift that God gave me. It is all about me and how I'm living and how I want to be comfortable. And I don't have to tell my husband, I don't have to tell my boyfriend, I don't have to tell anybody. I can go and kill this baby on my own. The